It's take two, and we're already getting better. You see that Matthew's found the music button here, so we're going to look at a second. Bring it in. Not Matthew.
What was that?
Did you make this music yourself?
I did, actually. Yep, I made it with my good buddy Dave.
His good buddy Dave, who will not be featured on this podcast, at least not on this episode.
He will not.
Judging by Matthew not being able to hear me, I was bragging on our own prowess and our improvements here between our first and second episode live on StreamYard, which I almost forgot the name of. So thank you guys again if you're listening to this on StreamYard, YouTube, or any of the other various places it comes from. This is, of course, Against the Mob Codcast with Logan Carpenter and Matthew Billingsley, your favorite anarchist contrarians, here to tell you everything that you're wrong about and to bullshit. And honestly, we're not really sure where we're starting today because we didn't really prep. That was the other line I was thinking of in the shower earlier is always under prepped, but somehow always overwhelming, maybe.
It's actually not bad.
That's part.
That's it. No, definitely, actually, you're onto something with the under prepped. It was like it's the pendulum swing. You know what I mean? Because at a certain point, the filter for us getting episodes out was because we would over prep for things. We would spend a full week trying to do research for the topic versus, you know what I mean? And so now the pendulum, I think we'll find our balance. Like all things, it takes time to figure out how to, we'll find our balance.
That's right. This isn't the finished product. It never will be the finished product because we don't intend to stop improving for you guys out there. And of course, we're also dicking around and experimenting with all this stuff in live time. So we appreciate your patience in the meantime.
But yeah, on the under prepped part, I got nothing. So this is the problem, right? So like a little bit behind the scenes how the sausage is made. We have had like an ongoing evolution of how we try to get episodes out. We were recording pretty frequently, but I just couldn't bother to edit the episodes. And so here, this is
producer kind of failing me.
Yeah, he certainly was. And one of the ways that we were trying to think that we could try to like streamline it, because we did find kind of a pace that we enjoyed, was to jot down a topic once a day throughout the week. And I played catch up for the week before and have not done a single thing for this week. And Logan even reminded me, and I was like, oh yeah, no, thanks for the reminder, and still didn't do shit about it. So
I particularly liked the very gracious thank you that you gave me before you ignored the warning you needed to get some topics down.
Yeah, no doubt. It's just like it's about the same energy that you gave Ricky and I when like, hey, you should download Insurgency. You're like, yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I'll look into it. I did look into it. It was almost $100, and I was like, yeah.
Wait, it's $100. There's no way that game's $100.
It was $80. When I looked online, I was like, I don't want.
There's no freaking way.
I've got a whole FIFA ladder to climb to get ahead of all the competition. I can't possibly about Insurgency right now.
No, that's fair. I wouldn't pay $100 for it either. It's not that good. Anyways,
we're almost 5 minutes in. I'm sure people are bored to death listening to us talk about absolutely nothing. I think today we should start with this interesting story, of which I'm going to share my screen for, and it is not that one, that one.
All right, let's see. Here we go.
Brace yourselves. This one's extra gruesome because what this woman allegedly did was murder a cat. And if that's not enough, she also ate it.
She destroyed that cat. This is.
First responders found this woman on the scene covered in blood with cat hair still stuck to her lips. It was so disturbing, it even shook up veteran officers.
As long as I've been a policeman, I've never had a call where someone was eating a cat.
This case is out of Canton.
Oh, they cut out the best part. So there is right after he says, I've never seen anybody eat a cat. In the original video, one of the officers makes a very dark joke, which I don't remember right now, but I immediately was like, that guy, that's my guy right there. That guy's been on the force for a while. He looked at that rookie who was like in my 10 years, I've never. And he's like, buck up, kid. This is some tough shit. Never heard of bath salts before, man. There's some wild people out here.
Yeah. Did they ever figure out why she was eating a cat? That's pretty bizarre.
Mental illness mixed with drugs. There was a whole very sad backstory of her like losing her kids, and I think it was even telling cops she killed her kids that night, but she had given them to another family member who I think in turn was not good to the children, who were then turned over to Child Protective Services. So it was a long one of the calls is even from her cousin who saw her on like Instagram Live. I think she went either Instagram or Facebook Live in order to show people her eating the cat. But yeah, apparently somebody's poor house cat went up to this distressed crackhead and got its head twisted off like a dove and chewed into.
Damn, that's sad. I was really hoping for I don't know. That's like I don't know. I don't know what backstory I was really expecting if she's eating.
Well, the cat actually molested her when she was a child, so it was a revenge killing. No,
I don't.
A crazy woman ate a cat.
Yeah, I don't know what type of backstory I was actually expecting from that. It sounds just about right. Drugs and mental illness checks out.
Drugs and mental illness. That's the formula you get to before you get cat hair on your lips when police arrive.
It's got to be a hell of a
I don't
scene to
know
show
where
up to.
Yeah, how do you approach it? I think at one point that was maybe another great part of the 20-minute video there that I watched that I'm not going to subject everyone to here. At one point they're calling and they're like, hey, we need police and an ambulance. And it's not the first person that's called. So they're like, yes, police are on the way. And they were like, what about the ambulance? And they were like, eating a cat's more like animal cruelty than like ambulance type of behavior. So we're probably just going to shackle this one up and throw her away. Like, nah, we're not sending the ambulance to this one. So yeah, that is an interesting. I mean, that's a tough approach as a police officer. I mean, you can run in there and try to tackle that person, but the cat's
you
dead
can
already.
taser.
Yeah, which doesn't tend to work great in conflict with amphetamines. I've seen a lot of amphetamine patients kind of walk through that taser. So
yeah, it's probably not. It's probably not worth shooting her over. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's worth lethal force.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. It maybe comes down to like, what is your expectation of rehabilitation for somebody like that? Do you like is shooting this person a mercy killing and kind of removing a bad apple from the population?
Yeah, I don't know.
How fascist do you want to get with that one?
I think that you can. I don't know. I think you could probably make a recovery. You know what I mean? I think that there is a road to redemption where if you get caught eating a cat, that you could actually integrate back in society with like some sort of, you know.
Here's a good would you rather that just popped in my head. Would you rather be caught eating a cat, somebody's beloved pet, or fucking a cat?
I'll take eating the cat.
I would think that's probably easier to come back from. I don't know that the memes don't stop if you get caught fucking a cat.
No, eating the cat you gloss over in the news cycle pretty damn quick, but the meme of you with the second one lives forever. Yeah, no, I'd rather eat the cat.
Damn, that was an easy one, huh? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think usually the move is to like make the would you rather tougher, but I don't even know where to pivot on that one. I almost said, what if it's your cat? But what does that do for the story?
As if I have a line. It's like I won't. No, it's like God, no, I'd never.
All right, I don't want my cat to die. I'll fuck my cat, I guess. The best part of this story, and I didn't look up the exact spelling of it, but the woman's last name is Farrell.
It's very fitting.
And I thought quite funny for somebody who's eating animals raw in the street to be named Farrell is
yeah, that's
it's maybe indication of simulation theory once again. Like there's no way this happened without the universe messing with us.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody about this, and I'd said that like the absurd whoever's running the absurdity setting.
That's who you talking? Okay.
No, just the absurdity setting and how it's out of control. And she's like, no, it got out of control years ago, and now it's like we left AI in charge of it, and that's why it's so freaking out of control.
We're seeing the rampancy at this point.
Yeah, it's like the AI has been running the absurdity setting for our simulation for years, and that's why it's just all starting to fall apart. The human controls are gone.
The bumpers have been taken off the bowling alley. It does. There are certainly things out there that kind of make you turn your head. Are you a big proponent of simulation theory yourself?
Yeah, I think it's more plausible than not at the end of the day, just from the kind of the way I approach it. You either you live in the base reality or you don't, and you live in a simulated reality, and the chances of you living in a simulated reality are far greater than you living in the base reality. Just out of
one simulation being run is very rare, so that it would be much more likely that trillions upon trillions of simulations would be run, and therefore being one base reality, it's lower odds than winning the lotteries per se.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of the way I look at it. I mean, yeah, I buy into simulation theory. It's not something I have like a super strong opinion on, but it would not shock me. You know what I mean? If somehow we were able to break through the veil and see, it's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense that this is The Sims. Just like super fucked up
theory
Sims.
Of your theory of the compounding nature of it getting more absurd, because it seems like in 2016 it was like, wow, Donald Trump's the president, we must live in a simulation, and now that seems such a small cliff note and footnote in the grand story of American politics.
Oh yeah, it's gotten so out of control.
I was having that talk with somebody. I know that's when we approach a lot on the show, but just like, we have an interesting November ahead of us. Like, I don't know if any of us have fully grasped the potential for shit to really hit the fan. Like, it's unlikely that we're going to see either side really accept the results of this election. I don't know. It's just, it could get hairy quick.
I agree with that. I think that we have probably entered the realm where I think that either side, and there's the perspective, right? It always matters. But if you shift out, it has been an ongoing kind of like, both sides have played this game since 2000, right? And we kind of forget it. But
well before that too.
But also, it's like in the more recent era, like you have Al Gore and George Bush, and you have Bush v, or is it Gore v Florida or Bush? But anyways, right? So there were already calls that, well, that's not a legitimate election. We heard it in 2016. We've heard in 2020. You know what I mean? Like, this is actually nothing new.
People have completely forgot about the history of it, but it's really just kind of building upon itself. Every election, it's gotten more intense. But this isn't a new idea. It's at least been around since Gore Bush, and
before then,
if it's been thrown out before that. I mean, I can't think of an example, but I would not be shocked at all.
There is, buried somewhere deep in the recesses of my useless information, I know that there are previous contested elections in American history that were resolved in, dubious ways. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but it's nothing new, right? I think as long as you have elections, you're going to have some sort of foul play.
It looks like we made it all the way till 1788 before we had our first contested election.
So that was what, our first one? Second one?
Yeah, that was the first election.
I was about to say.
No, excuse me. Second election, yeah. It was George was ratified in for the first one, and then the second one immediately they had contested. Hey, what the fuck are we talking about? This isn't real. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
We've had one election before we corrupted it with talk of
because it's actually a really good strategy.
Russian interference.
And there's actually a really interesting article in the Philadelphia Inquirer about Pennsylvania's kind of not broken election system, but like changes that should have been made after 2020, but never were. And people getting it. It's like, hey, look, like, don't be shocked if if Pennsylvania can't call this election that night. But if you can't call an election that night, right now, all of a sudden, with every day that grows, you get more and more calls of yada yada. Yeah, I'm fully convinced that it doesn't matter who wins, the other team's going to cry foul. There's no way, and thus we descend into the madness.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder too. I mean, I would have told you without a shadow of a doubt 4 months ago, 3 months ago, that there's no way Pennsylvania's not going Trump after the assassination attempt. Like, to be, I mean, I thought it had a huge reverberation throughout the entire political landscape. And shockingly, we're not even talking about it anymore. And they've completely let that go by the wayside. But I thought for sure Pennsylvania, at the very least, like, to be that close to an event this large where a presidential candidate got shot, like, how would they not? I pulled it up. It looks like they're polling 47% apiece between Kamala and Trump, Pennsylvania.
It's pretty close. I think at this point, it is probably whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the White House. I think that's kind of what it goes down to. And it also has like a very surprising amount of undecided voters. It's got like 15% of voters are undecided, which is actually huge if you think about it.
I think we need a lot more of that. It's so, I was having that conversation today of like, there's so many people, and this was with another libertarian, of course. So our viewpoint on it is like, we have this strong ideological view on how government should be approached. And it doesn't make sense to pick your party before you have some kind of inkling of what you believe. And I think we get so much of that because politics is reaching younger and younger ages now, even. So you got kids who like feel an obligation to be really strong on one side or the other politically. And they find their in-group before they ever really have any theological conversations within their own head, even. You know, it's like if you don't purse this stuff out, then what do you really believe other than you've just picked a team and you're rooting for them like they're the Dallas Cowboys?
Yep, I think that's it. That's what politics has probably been for a long time and will continue to be so. You know, it's like it's time that we just accept that there are fundamental flaws with the electoral process that will probably never be resolved within the system. And we're really just working out the trolley problem of, do we continue down the tracks and continue killing the same, you know what I mean? Do we let the victims that will be ran over with this other system, or do we pull the lever and try something else? Not knowing how many, you know what I mean? We don't know if the other tracks are good either, but we're really just, you know, it's like we're just in the trolley problem. It's like, well, do we accept this as what it is, or
exact trolley problem the other day with a red track, a blue track, and then a green track that said third party with no people on it, and it was like, it's that easy, and they were getting destroyed online by the Democrats and Republicans. Like,
oh, absolutely,
it's buried them because they're in such a minority just to have the idea. And granted, that's a very naive view to be like, oh yeah, utopia is right here. It's just the thing we haven't tried yet is going to fix everything. Is always a silly viewpoint, and especially because they didn't label it libertarian or green or any kind of actual viewpoint. They just said third party, like it's uncorruptible. Like, oh, JP Morgan spent all their money on Democrats and Republicans. They couldn't possibly pay off the politicians in the Green Party.
Yeah, I think one of the conversations that we should probably be having is asking ourselves, is this has this system like worked to its fullest, right? Like, maybe this is what you get with a first past the post representative republic. You know, like maybe this is the best that you can ever do with the system. And we've got to decide, are we okay with that or not? But this idea of like, oh, we just need to tweak it here, tweak it there. I don't think that actually matters. I don't think that gets you anywhere. In the incremental is not going to get you anywhere in this system. And so it's like, are we okay with the beast the way that it is? Or do we try something else? I think that that's probably where the conversation should shift. Because this idea of like, I don't know. I still think that at the local level, I think politicians actually can make a large difference because that's where most of the influence is, right? Like those are people that make decisions that influence your life tomorrow versus this kind of grand strategy. And so, you know, it's like, so maybe it works good for a local system, but it's not good for a state level or a national level. It just seems like it's weird that the conversations.
What is the difference between a local versus a national politician? I would argue that a large part of that is just simply being connected to the community in which they're governing.
Absolutely.
That sentiment.
So, because you have to look at these people, you know what I mean? Like, especially in we can take my small town, for example. Like, you see these, you know what I mean? Like, you have to see these people in the grocery store. You have to go about your daily life and interact with the people that your decisions actually affect versus some, you know, kind of abstract ideal that it boils down to. Like even like New York City, you know what I mean? Like the mayor of New York City is no more connected to the people of New York City than the president is to the people of the United States. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not like he's at the bodega down the street.
Yeah, like your chances of. So I just think that for that reason, because you actually have to, I don't know, the consequences of it. You know what I mean? Because
So this was just an idea that popped in my head because I'm always thinking about how do you, I call it a lot of times the bottleneck of corruption. Like
Sure.
the idea that we have this congressional system now that and a presidential system as well that they can simply be bought off. So how do you avoid that? And in the past, I've thought things like vigilante system. Like, do you have a special government agency or non-governmental agency that looks at kind of offing the bad apples all the time? And how do you then, but then of course it's like, well, you just start paying those guys off, you know, and this, which is probably always the problem is any of these. It's like, as soon as somebody has enough money, they can pay off any one of these individuals in some underhanded way. I've also thought of like the philosopher king idea of like you raise some promising children that you sacrifice from the general population to go to a program where they are taught with as no political bias, hopefully in an ideal world, so that you can bring them all up with these political ideas, these philosophy ideas, so that they can be perfect governors and actually find the right system. And those are your leaders of the future. But maybe the other one is like a prosperity equalizer to the average American. Like if maybe that number needs to be like, hey, let's cut out the top 5% of the population so that you're not skewing the numbers with the infinitely rich getting richer and being able to push that up. And like, what does the average American make? And that's your salary, man. That's what you get to make. And if you make a dime more, we cut your head off.
No, I think there's actually something to that. When you talk about like actionable things that would probably, you know, that could possibly make an influence and impact. I don't think that like a congressional, like a constitutional amendment that says that the salary of the representative of their district shall be the median income of that district. Simple as that. So right, and because right, so it's like in San Francisco, right? Your median and like you might make that $140,000, but like the representative,
you got to count all those homeless people. It's going to be like 25 cents a day.
Well, it's probably accounted for, and that's why it's only 140 and not 300,000. You know what I mean? To be fair, it probably has already taken that into consideration. But like my area, right? It's like the representative would make like $40,000 a year, and I think there's the option, or there's always the possibility that you would like get better people that are seeking it for the right reasons. There's also on that idea of like the philosopher king or the political class. The more and more I think about it, the more I like the idea of a political class. And it's not to say that it's going to breed like perfect people for this, but like you can take like John Quincy Adams as an example, right? Debatable whether he's a middle of the road president by every metric that you look at. You know what I mean? He's not overwhelmingly good, not overwhelmingly bad. He is just like smack dab as an average, but solid U.S. president. Because you start to get really skewed towards the bad end in some ways. But
he killed a lot less people with drones than Obama did. I'll tell you that much.
Yes, he did. And so, but you get somebody, right? And there's pros and cons to this, but the pros are you have somebody that spent their entire life preparing to be president, right? You have somebody that it's like your dad's like, you're gonna go to law school, you're gonna learn the law. Now that we're in a new country, you're going to go overseas and you're going to spend time as an ambassador and you're going to learn international politics and you're going to learn diplomacy and you're going to come back and you're going to work in a cabinet position. You're going to, you know what I mean? So by the time that you run for president, now, whether it's like there's a better choice out there, well, that's fine. But it's either choice is actually somebody that's knowledgeable to be sitting in that position. Like Calvin Coolidge is a really good example of that too. He starts off as like a town councilor in whatever town he grew up in. Where did he grow up in? Massachusetts. But so he starts off as a town councilor, goes to the Mass State Assembly, ends up as the mayor, then does a couple of terms in the state Senate, ends up as a governor, then becomes vice. Right? It's like somebody that by the time that he actually becomes president, there's somebody that's very well schooled in administration. And the point, and why I think that it's probably good that you have somebody that's been in it, right? We call it the swamp, and there's some pros or there's some cons to that I'm not ignoring. But the pro is that there is a huge difference between being a good politician and being a good administrator. And spending years in administration, learning how the state works, you're going to actually get somebody that can do the job versus a politician, right? Because like, what are politicians? They're just cheerleaders that we say, oh yeah, just because we like the way that he speaks, let's go ahead and give him all of this power and authority to administrate and to govern. But the two are separate skill sets. And so maybe if you had a political class that spent their whole life trying to become good administrators, well, you're not going to look at him as like, oh, well, that's an overwhelmingly popular candidate. It's like, oh no, that guy's just good administration. Put him in the role.
It really reminds me of I think I was probably a junior in high school, and the class above me were having their class elections, and they had everybody voting for it, and it was time for the big speeches. And one of the guys gets up there from the senior class, and he does this big speech about how politics is about improving the world and not about popularity. So I really encourage you not to just vote for the most popular person, but actually vote for. And the whole time I'm thinking, you're the coolest guy in the school. What are you talking
about? Who was
it? I don't even want to like out him. I don't know if that's weird
enough.
I also don't know that I can remember. Oh no, I do know his name. I've got it. I'll tell you afterwards. But
all right.
It was just funny. And then of course he won in a landslide because he was the cool guy that played guitar and everybody loved him and all the girls wanted to sleep with him. So he won like a 98% margin in a senior class. But it's not dissimilar to kind of what we have now. You get these people who are just popular. I mean, that's the whole Donald Trump thing is like, hey, I'm a TV personality. I'm gonna get myself up there. I like how you're guessing in the chat. No.
Okay.
All right, I'll give it to you in the chat.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
God damn it, maybe lose my train of thought thinking about high school presidents. I think I was expounding on it, just kind of being a popularity contest and like the need though at the same time to kind of feel like the everyday man. So you get these super rich out of Yale, out of Harvard kind of elite class people are the only ones that are allowed to run that can make it that far and to have enough money to actually be able to pull a campaign off. But then they have to kind of dial it back at the end and be like, hey, I'm just one of you guys. I'm a normal person just like all of you. This isn't a big deal. And it's an interesting balancing act in the sway of all of that, I guess.
So what about, right, because what ultimately you do get is this idea of like the groomed political classes, kind of like we're seeing the worst case scenario of it, where it is just kind of like it's all the same guys from Yale, Harvard, all of the same tracks, right? But what if we approached that the same way that other countries approach like trades, right? So at a certain point, right, because not everybody just goes on to high school and continues with a formal education in other countries. They, it's like, okay, you're going to go to trade school. You're actually an academic. Let's go ahead and get you on a track to go to college. What if we applied that same to where it's like, hey, look, you have the skill sets to probably become a good like political administrator. Well, let's start and from that you could try to alleviate the funnel of the Ivy League bottleneck. But if you start pulling, right, because you're going to find the talent in a lot of different ways. And so what if, what if the education structure was kind of like revamped to where, hey, we identify that these are traits. And so let's get all of these people they're on a similar track to become
to go to the newly refurbished Guantanamo Bay Island where we have our political training camps.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm fully aware of all of the pitfalls and dangers that come with, you know what I mean? But I guess if anything, I just lament like a time that I never got to experience where whether or not like Teddy Roosevelt is I don't know, didn't live through it. Can't say if he's a good president historically, looking back through all of those other measures. You know what I mean? It's like, at least he's somebody that you could be proud of. It's like, yeah, Teddy Roosevelt's our president. guy, like maybe he embellishes his charge up San Juan Hill, but he also got shot and continued to give a speech and says it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. You know what I mean? Like that's somebody that I want as a president.
A lot of people don't know that the bull moose references to his penis. He is quite a large number.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like there's like, I guess I lament an era that I never got to live and experience, where you at least could feel good about like who's up there.
I think
Yeah, I don't know.
And it may be part of that like veil of ambiguity that you get before the internet too. Like I'm always kind of skeptical of the great leaders that happened before the internet, because part of and that's a sentiment I always hate that I hear people say is like, oh, the politicians are so gross now and it's so corrupt now and it's like, no, it's not. It's the same it's always been. You just have access to videos of them in live time.
Right.
And you have people reporting on them all the time in live time and throwing podcasts out there and putting the dirt out for everybody to see, so there aren't any skeletons hiding in the closet anymore, you know?
Yeah, so I guess on that note, back on this like realist pill that we should all be taking. So what? You know what I mean? Like, I guess like, so what? Like politicians do sleazy things. Am I surprised? Like people do sleazy things, and I don't know why it should be shot. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't think that it should be overwhelmingly. They shouldn't disqualify you. Just like, okay, like who cares? Like nobody looks at like, so what? Bill Clinton got a blowy in the fucking Oval Office. JFK had Marilyn Monroe embarrass his wife while she's saying happy birthday. You know what I mean? It's like everybody knew it was going on. But I would still rather have JFK than Donald Trump.
You know, that's the big conspiracy theory I don't know if I've ever heard, is it could have been his wife from embarrassing him. Did she actually did she set the whole thing up? Did she pull the gun out of the purse?
It's Murder on Oriental Express, I think. Probably lots of people wanted him dead, and nobody, you know what I mean? Who knows exactly? Right. I'm sure there was lots of competing interest to kill him.
I tend to always fall on the side that the group that is still suppressing that information might have had a heavy hand in it.
Probably.
The group that still redacts that from our ability to read even after 50 years might have had a strong hand in the way that went.
Yeah, and we'll probably, but also what's interesting is like, we all know, you know what I mean? Like it's not outrageous. Like that used to be not in the, like the idea that the CIA killed John F. Kennedy used to be a conspiracy theory. It's now kind of just like bubbled into the kind of the zeitgeist of our culture as Americans. We just kind of all like, even people that I know aren't conspiracy theorists are like, yeah, CIA probably killed Kennedy. Yeah, whether Oswald is CIA or not, you know what I mean? They're like, well, I don't know the details, but yeah, it makes sense the CIA killed Kennedy. You know, it's like that checks out. And so it's not even like an outrageous thing anymore. So I guess if anything,
I guess it's hard to quantify, being that we were born 25-ish years after the event. I wonder what the
40
temperature
years
of the time was. Like, did people buy the conventional story right away? Was there all tons of conspiracies immediately? I wonder how quickly the buy over, like when did 50% of the population start believing that the CIA or the mafia killed JFK, you know?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that it's really hard to parse out about, like how much people know stuff, right? And so what this reminds me of, I did one of my senior classes, I did a research paper, and it was in that genocide class, and the topic was I looked at, like, we always talk about somebody should have done something. But my question was, well, how much did people know? And so I looked through the archives of the London Times through the entirety of 1916 and 1917 when the Armenian genocide was going on, and how many times Armenia was even mentioned in the London Times. And it was mentioned like 4 times. You know what I mean? Like it's so when everyone's like, oh, someone should have done something, it's like, about what? They didn't even know about it. And
yeah,
so
I mean, that was kind of they didn't really know about the genocide of the Jews in Nazi Germany until they were kind of exonerating those camps, right? Like that was
there was
kind
like
of the moment
there was
of like,
rumors.
oh, shit.
I mean, we had heard about it, right? But nobody understood the extent of it until
Yeah.
they started like stumbling across the camps. But I say that to like it's hard to figure out like how much, because that's the other pitfall of like the bottleneck of information, right? If there's only 4 newspapers and 1 news station, well, yes, you do get a shared American experience, which is good for the myth of America that binds us together. Pro of that, the con is, well, you only have to get 4 newspapers and 1 news station on board, and they control the net. You know what I mean? So there's the con of it. So pros and cons of all of
Right.
this.
It's really good for empire building. If you're not worried about like the morality of what you're doing around the world and you just want a stronger nation, then yeah, it's nice to have one consolidated message to push forward.
Yeah.
I think on
Go
this
ahead.
philosophy king idea, I had a very impassioned argument set out to me one time by a history or a poli-sci professor at Texas State. And it was essentially the idea, part of it baked in was this kind of what we're discussing with the philosopher king idea of like, you get somebody who is brought up to be the leader. You have somebody who's trained from birth by your previous leader, knowing their entire life, the burden that's on their shoulder. I guess the contrast to that is living their entire life above the law and completely corrupted and unabashed by the simpleton peasants around them.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting, at least, that and that it came with a whole slew of other arguments of like interconnected alliances and like, look at the way we go to war today. If we just kind of like get upset about something and Congress bamboozles us into thinking there's massive weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, and all of a sudden we're in 20 years of war and even longer, I guess, because we still hadn't left the Middle East at this point. Versus like these interconnected alliances you get from marriages and a good idea of how the monarchy doesn't go after you. And I don't know, there is a part of it that's like a little bit difficult to argue against today when we watch America become essentially the largest empire the world's ever seen, and military bases in every country, and probably responsible for more deaths around the world than any group.
Arguable. I don't know if any group. Communists sure killed a lot of people. You know what I mean?
It is fair, but if you take the year by year average over,
I wonder,
since World War II, I bet we're up there.
I wonder if we've killed, because what's the Mao, 50 million more or less Chinese
That is
dead?
a lot.
I don't think that we've killed 50 million people in the last 70 years. We've killed definitely tens of millions. But 50, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's not to say that America's foreign policy does not have its problems.
It would probably be hard to get there. It looks like from a quick Google search from 1980 to 2022, there were 60,770 recorded deaths at the hands of the United States military.
Okay, that's probably not including collateral damage, right? Because there's
a
couple
kind of a
million.
horrifying number. 83% is due to accidents, illness, self-inflicted wounds. So oopsie, we killed some civilians, and oopsie, that PTSD victim that we sent to war killed himself accounts for the vast majority. You know what? That's actually, I bet that's U.S.
That's got to be U.S. No, because
That's U.S.
Vietnam.
casualties, probably.
Because Vietnam was like 58. So I mean, there's like 3 million dead from.
Yeah, excuse me. That is in the
There's
U.S.
like-
military.
You know, there's like 3 million dead from Korean War. There's probably another couple million dead from Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. You know what? I bet like directly, indirectly responsible for probably like 10 million deaths over the last 70 years.
It's
Which is
interesting.
not
It's hard to find numbers on that, to be honest. Everything that pops up seems to be our own
I bet
casualties.
we'll come back next week. That's actually a really interesting topic
That's
to
a fun
research
topic.
and figure. Yeah, it is.
Who's actually killing the most people in the world?
I think it's going to be the communist, because if you put communist Russia and communist China together, it's damn near like 70, 80 million people. That's pretty hard to beat.
That feels a little bit like the Chinese were doing inside the Olympic medal counts, though, with like Jewish and European Americans versus Afro Americans, where they're dividing the medals up.
Right, splitting them
To
up.
throw all the communists together is maybe not completely fair, because they weren't exactly interconnected and on the same page. They were still kind of separate entities.
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
fair.
If you're going to do
You-
that, you'd have to say, well, let's do all democracies then, you know?
Well, you have the Sino. Yeah, no, you have the Sino-Russian split. You know, I mean, they almost go to war with each other at least like 7 different times in the last
China.
in the last, I don't know, 50 60 years. So that's fair, but still, I think that that would be interesting. Back to the Philosopher King thing. I think that we've seen that's why I think that we should like be doing some really cool thought experiments and maybe some real world tests with this, because we've seen what happens when you get the roll of the dice with the monarchy. And sometimes you get some very unimpressive figures, right? Like Tsar Nicholas II,
Mhm.
the guy who the Romanov Empire comes crashing to a halt and he gets executed in a basement with his family in the most unceremoniously way possible, is an underwhelming person in every, you know what I mean? Like in just every measure possible that you would want in a leader, just not good. He's indecisive, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah, I mean, the
you don't
monarchy
want
is
it to
also brought us the Habsburgs dynasty, who like inbred
well,
themselves to death, and
yeah, you
probably
get
went
some
through a
weird
lot of tremendous
chins.
ideas along the way in the end there.
You get some weird chins and hemophilia with it. So I'm not saying that the monarchy is the way to go, but if you had a philosopher king class where you pull the best and brightest and let them rise through a meritocracy, but they've been pulled because they are good at this, right? Like, look at Khrushchev. He is a prime example of somebody that just like you, this is a guy that grew up a peasant. And if it wasn't for the Russian Revolution, would have spent his entire life like cleaning horse stables. But you get a revolution, and all of a sudden you get this guy who is really smart and good at the game of politics rise
I
to
am
the top.
impressive president after all.
You know, it's like, so you can, so I think that you would probably find like an equal distribution of talent, maybe not equal, but you know what I mean? Like the distribution of talent that would make you a good administrator is deep, and you're going to find it in places that, unless you have a system that tries to seek it out and elevate it, just gets buried. But Khrushchev is like one of the best geopolitical game players that the world
Mhm.
saw in the 20th century. And this is a guy that was raised illiterate, cleaning stables in some remote part of Russia that none of us could find on the map.
Maybe, and at the risk of being a hypocrite towards my own theory of like deifying leaders that are in the past, and we don't really have solid evidence other than what their own scholars wrote about them. A lot of these great, tremendous leaders come right after the big turnover of a government. Like, it gives you the opportunity for a more of a meritocracy, perhaps, because there is a power void. So you actually have an opportunity. As I was saying that, I also thought it's also how some of the worst leaders came into power and completely starved people to death immediately after their revolution, or caused their own populace to turn on them a couple years after and behead them on some steps of Paris. So,
yeah, absolutely.
so I guess the vacuum doesn't necessarily always correlate with a great leader, but at least it does allow for an opportunity. And to your point, like, you never know where that ingenious person is. You also never know the perspective. Like, if every president you have, every leader of your nation goes to the same college, like we tend to do, in the same law school, and learns the same information, they may be very impressive in that information. They may be more impressive than every other law student in every other college in the nation. But their purview is of that elite class that went to Harvard.
Yeah.
So you miss opportunities for everybody else. And I would say it's probably a decent argument to be made that that's a good reflection of what's been going wrong in America for so long, where the rich are getting richer and the wars continue at the risk of the peasants' lives, because they don't care. They're not the ones going to war. They're the ones that are benefiting from the stock market going up, and from investments rather than savings, and from things of churning money in banks rather than actually building things and creating infrastructure around the nation.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that is like, we are seeing the pitfall of what happens when you do have it all ran through. Like, it's diversity of, right? Like we always say, it's like diversity of skin color versus diversity of thought. I don't really care. Like, okay, cool. Like, your administration's a bunch of different colors, but you guys all think the exact same way. So to me, you're all just, just
I heard
this
somebody
blob of
recently say
gray
that, I'm really
nastiness.
rooting for Kamala Harris because I think the people in Gaza deserve to be bombed by somebody that looks like them at least. It's like kind of the exact sentiment there. It's like, guys, we put a person of color, female, in charge, but it's like, yeah, but we're still oppressing half the world and bombing some of the poorest human beings out there to continue the American oil dollar that we forced the world into in turn again to participate in for our dollar to work.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. And I guess like where I'm coming from is because I'm in my quote unquote like post libertarian phase where I guess if anything, I'm just like trying to chew on like what are ways that because it's not like yeah, sure, the world of like peaceful anarchy where everybody, you know what I mean, gets along or at least can self-sort. That's such a fucking pipe dream where I don't even think it's reasonable to think about at a certain point. And so I guess I've been wondering, it's like, how do we like make this whole like central government work? And it's from just like a point of pragmatism because it's probably far more likely to get a central government to do something than it would be to get like 100,000 different communities to try to cooperate.
So incredibly sad at how far you've fallen. You've come right back. I mean, this is the whole ideology of the anarchy libertarian thing is like, it's not more likely. It's the pipe dream to think you're ever going to get the corruption out of government. So the solution is to get rid of, or at least lessen the power of said government over you.
I agree with that 100%. I'm all about devolving power from the state, but I think what is far more realistic is power in the state because I just don't know how you. I mean, we've talked about this 100 times, and we can go around the drain again on it. I just don't know how you dissolve the state, even in a phase out way, without just becoming an utter hellhole for most people. You know, I think that the result of I don't know. I think that to a degree, it's like humans, we yearn for the yoke of the master. And
to your point on that subject, I have these discussions a lot, and with people who I value their intellect a little bit and pay attention to politics, I usually can find a foot in the door with my libertarian talk and get some like, okay, that I get where you're coming from. If they don't turn to my side completely, I can at least get them to kind of acknowledge it. There's a whole slew of voters out there and a huge campaign to just vote, guys. You got to get out there and vote. Doesn't matter if you don't even know the names of them. Just get out there and put a name in the system. I don't engage with those people typically. Like I'll talk to them, and if I bring up politics, I see the glaze go over their eyes, and it's like I just take a left turn, and I'm like, all right, well, there's no reason to really have this conversation with this person because they're not an active thinker or even has fleshed out the beginnings of what a political ideology would be.
Agreed.
And that's the large swath that I struggle with. It like how do you
yearn for the yoke?
And I don't even know if it's yearn for the yoke as much as it's just like has no critical thinking skill and is just incapable of when all of the propaganda is from the state is going to be enforcing the idea of a larger and more powerful and robust state, then it's really hard to break through to them on any capacity because they're not turning on any extra voice. They're not even turning on the voices on TV. They're hearing it secondhand from politicians, what they should do. And they're kind of taking that as fact. They're not even watching Fox and CNN, which is already garbage, let alone going out and finding the small-time podcast journalist who isn't paid by anybody and is struggling to get by. So and has less bias, although nobody has no bias. But like I take a fair amount of time trying to vet the people I listen to on a weekly basis to get my political information, and it's constant that I talk to people who even follow politics pretty closely and have no idea that the person they're quoting is like, dude, they are bought and paid for. Like you're listening to shills of the government, of shills of the big banks and of Wall Street.
Yeah.
So that is a large undertaking when my whole argument in this space is like, oh, we just have to eventually win the culture over. It's like, all right, good luck.
And I think that maybe you can. And I don't, you know what I mean? It's not that I'm like, I hate the idea or I don't believe it to be like the best intellectual theory on how you organize a society. I just think that I don't know. I guess I'm like I said, I just have, because of what you just said, I don't know how you would ever go about, right? Because I mean, we talked about this way back.
Well, the good news is they're giving you a lot of ammunition.
Most people don't want to think about politics, right? And it's not that they're incapable of critically thinking about it. It's that they actively choose not to. And so
that's a really good point. I painted them all as midwits. It's not even dumb people a lot of times. It's
no, I
just
think
like
that the thing most of they
people with
choose they
4 kids at home and they've got a job they're working on and they're trying to keep their small business alive. And it's like, I don't know, how do I give a shit about politics? How do I read that when I have basketball practice followed by football practice followed by cheerleading, and then I have to go make sure my small business survives on the side?
Yeah. I think so much of it is that people, or even if they don't, right? Like even if you have some regular just 9 to 5 and I guess like kind of like let's call them a drone. I don't want to be derogatory, but you know what I mean? Like somebody that just kind of like gives an NPC that kind of lives in the city and they go to work and they drive to their cubicle and they do their job and then they drive home and it's like those are people that
and it's respectable and maybe even a better way to live your life while how much time do we waste screaming into the void about politics and thinking about politics and thinking about how to fix it? And
probably
meanwhile,
more than
like you could have spent that time enriching yourself and your family.
Yeah, you could have like spent your evening like reading a book and enjoying yourself.
Or getting that garden.
Or
you're
watching TV. Yeah, no, it's like you know what I mean? Or like whatever you choose to do. So I think
getting relegated in FIFA.
Yeah, there's that. I just think that for that, because so many people, and I know them in my real life, and I have nothing against them. I like them as human beings. They're good people, but sometimes like when politics comes up, they're not interested and they choose to not want to know anything about it. It's like, hey, look, I'm voting for Kamala because I can't stand Donald Trump, and that is it. And that's the end of the fucking conversation. And there's no amount of arguing, bartering, persuasion that's ever going to rock that person off that position because they don't want to be rocked. And so I guess if anything, I've been trying to think is like, okay, well, how do you then herd said people in a way that is most beneficial for society? Acknowledging all of the pitfalls that come with it. But
register as a Republican and then
no, I mean, it's like, how do you, because ultimately that's what you would, I mean, the best idea, I had somebody that I look up that's extremely smart. I mean, this is somebody that is just radically so much smarter than I do that they even entertain conversations with me, especially about their
smarter than I do
expertise.
When you're talking about somebody smarter than you are.
That's you. Yeah, I was just being, I was just trying to be coy. But they made an argument for why this kind of like the system, like representative democracy, it's like it works. And they're like, look, it's not a perfect system, but it works actually probably as good as it can, in the sense like most people, right? He's like, most people can't be bothered to learn about this things that impact their lives, right? And it's like, now we expect to like overturn all of these big decisions to people that, that can't be bothered to do something good for themselves. So like the best thing that you could ever do is like have somebody that tries to make decisions in their stead, because probably what's worse than having elected representatives voting for the people is having the people vote directly themselves. He's like, could you imagine like having like people try to like have an educated and this is when I was still on town council. He's like, could you imagine like every time that you wanted to do something, having to, like having to do the groundwork to explain to 1,200 voters the ins and outs of, He's like, could you imagine how much of a hassle it would be to do anything if you had to explain and get half of the people on board for some of the most meaningful, trivial tasks that don't, like non-consequential actions that government just kind of needs to take to function. He's like, could you imagine having to have half the people on board for that to do anything? He's like, it'd be a nightmare. He's like, so it's like this, it works in that regard. So I don't know. And it's not to say that I'm not like a freedom loving person still, because that's the thing I value the most. Like, leave me the fuck alone. But
to your credit, and I mean, I may be eating these words come November time, but I've really seen, and it seemed like it did kind of coincide with the assassination attempt, but it's been something that was building. There's been a lot more of a willingness to be outspoken on the right in the recent couple months. I've seen it a lot with, like, I'm a big comedy fan. I watch a lot of stand-up, and some of these live shows, you're seeing comedians that are a little more bashing of, especially Biden when he was there, but even Kamala, I've seen some now. and a little more of like pro-Trump comedy out there. And used to, you got the hisses and the boos from the crowd, anything that was pro-Trump. And it's like now you still get hisses and boos, but you also got a handful of people that are going the woo and the fucking yeehaws in the background. And it's interesting to see that cultural shift. So I suppose, to your argument, if there is any hope of capturing government, this is the type of moment you need when the culture swing is going from having been very PC and left to seemingly now starting to hit that center pendulum where it's maybe going to swing right now. The argument could be that, hey, this is the time to infiltrate the Republican Party so that when it does swing back to them, we're not living in a religious theocracy, but rather a more libertarian future.
That's
hopefully.
totally fair. No, that's actually very no. And so I guess the middle ground that I'm trying to walk here is like, I don't know if it's so much that you want to try to capture government, because I don't know if that's quite what I'm arguing for. I'm not saying that like, oh, libertarians need to get in positions of power to capture government. It's just like, I think government's just going to be the government despite anyone's best efforts. And
we've certainly made that argument a lot, that it's like the blob monster. It doesn't have a sentient like plan to move forward to make itself stronger. It's just that every incentive that exists is for it to reinforce itself.
yeah, man. So I don't know if it's like, because I don't know if capturing, because the idea of like capturing government means it implies that you could then like
Roll it.
wield it to how you want, and I don't think that that's possible. I guess if anything, it's just like I've come to the realization, it's like, well, the world that we live in is that there are people that are going to be elected to make decisions about other people's lives. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I mean, we can spend all day, and I mean, people have written books and philosophized about this for hundreds of years. That is all valid, but the reality is that, well, there will be an election and those people will have some sort of power. Whether you choose to recognize it or not does not mean that your failure to pay your property taxes doesn't mean the county comes and seizes your property and puts it on auction, right? It's like, choose to ignore it, choose to not, does not change the reality that people will be elected and they will be making decisions about your life. So I don't know, better somebody that's not a fucking twat or a bought and paid for shill to be in that position than not. You know, that's kind of where I lean to. It's not because I don't think that you could save it by capturing it. I spent 4 years of dealing with like the best intentions, and it's like, yeah, we'll slow down because this is government. It's like, yeah, those are great ideas, but that's not how this works. And despite it's like, and despite your best efforts and intentions, it's not happening because it's just government and you can't do it this way. And so that's kind of the whole thing. It's like, I'm not saying like just go out and vote. It's just, I'm just saying be conscious, because I don't know, maybe somebody would be better than somebody else. And that's not to say that that is good, but
it's maybe my hot takes. We need a just don't vote campaign of like, I don't know, like here's a PEMDAS problem. If you can't solve this in your own head, then don't worry about voting this November. Like, you're too dumb. Stay at home.
I agree with that too. I also am like a firm believer in like disenfranchising as many people as humanly possible. Like voting should not be like a general, you know what I mean? It's like, I guess if anything, I'm like coming back, like I'm coming back to my fascist tendencies. There,
I've seen it. I've seen it building.
On
this idea of like, don't let the good be or perfect be the enemy of good kind of idea. I had it thrown to me by one of my online friends I chat with from time to time. That's on the far left, just to kind of get that perspective. And her view was like, or at least one of the things she tossed at me was that, well, one of the benefits of democracy, even though and she's a communist and openly about it, is one of the benefits of a representative democracy, the republic like we have here, is that it's the most stable system of government. And I had to kind of push back on that, because I'm like, well, how long have we had any democracy last, really? What's the longest stretch that one's made? And is it really more? And you're a better student of history than me, so maybe you would know the answer to this. Like, would you consider a democracy to be the most stable form of government?
I would say that it probably has a lot more volatility in it versus a monarchy or an empire. You know what I mean? I think that the American democracy experiment, but it's pretty stable.
Young, too. I mean,
It
it's
is also
stable
young.
for 200-ish years.
And yeah, the Roman
50
Republic
years.
was relatively stable, but I actually think that we're not in, like, you always call it the American Empire, and I don't disagree with you, but I think that we're probably going to witness and live through the transition from the American Republic to the American Empire, like just like Rome did. You know what I mean? I think that we'll see, and I don't think it's Donald Trump, but I think that it could be Barron Trump. Actually,
No, this
it
is
might be, but
this is biblical shit, man. This is it's got to be an antichrist figure. It's a great deceiver. It's somebody. That's why like everybody got so up in arms about Obama. I mean, one, because they're racist conservatives, so that was part of it. But it was also like, holy shit! Look at the pizzazz this guy has on stage. Look at the pull and the charisma of this man.
he's still got it.
Everybody loves him. And it's like this could be the one, guys. This guy is a little too, but I think if you're buying into biblical prophecy, then it has
Which I'm
to
not.
Christians too. I don't necessarily either, but I do think that there's. I guess I don't buy into it in that it's perfect, but I do think there's a lot of knowledge in old religious texts. I probably read a lot more religious texts now that I'm agnostic than I ever did when I was practicing. And the reason for that is because I do think that, one, it's our oldest forms of history, albeit not perfect and definitely exaggerated.
No history is, though.
Over time. That's a great point as well. But also, I think there's a ton of knowledge. I mean, these are things that we found as human beings, as large groups of populations, to pass down to every generation for a very long time. And it's not to say that it's all perfect or valuable, but I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. And I don't know. I guess I'm kind of circling back to like, maybe there is something to the grand, like the end of the world is actually going to come when the kingdom is captured by somebody you all think's perfect. And they're the ones that are actually going to drive this whole thing into the ground. The cataclysm comes from who you thought was the savior.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, that's a valid.
Because it takes the buy-in, because in a democracy, half of us are screaming that Kamala is a witch right now, and the other half are screaming that Donald Trump's a fascist.
Right.
And so there isn't that amount of, even the tremendous power you were given as the president of the United States, it's still not ultimate power.
It's not absolute. And probably both are right. He probably is a fascist, and she probably is a witch. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and not like a she's probably like a literal witch, if I had to guess, or she's probably like a literal like lizard person. Like, something about her is so unnatural. I think if like lizard people are real,
I thought this was some kind of xenophobic thing towards Jamaica.
No, I got nothing against Jamaicans. Flirt's Jamaican. He's half Jamaican. I like him just fine.
I was hoping you'd say bad things about Jamaicans so I could report back to Flirt, but you didn't take the bait.
No, it's I think that she probably is like a literal witch, if I had to guess. You know what I mean? If those things exist, she's probably one of them.
I'll have to look online. I don't know if they have odds on that one exactly on my betting site, but I'll look into it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. It's a very interesting point. It's not to discredit it all, right? Because I'm in the same boat as you. I think that there's so much value and wisdom to be derived from things that I brushed off when we were both very much involved in the church. I'm not here to argue that. Sometimes I wonder about, like, I don't know, like how much stock should we put in some dude like hallucinating on an island? Should we let this like guide our decisions about how to navigate the 21st century? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about that. But because I mean, that's all Revelation is, you know what I mean? It's like, it's whatever John, I can't keep track of him, but he's on an island hallucinating. He sees all these things. So it's like, I mean, not to say that there's probably like some good morals to be derived from it, but I don't know if it should be a pathway to like navigate the 21st century.
Figure out how we move going forward. This is also fair. There's a lot of, there's also stories of like killing people with the jawbone of an ass and God sending down bears to murder children who made fun of one of his bald prophets.
Right. Yeah. There's
some stuff in there that you're like, I'm not sure what the value of that information is, but
no doubt.
I did think this is an interesting aside real quick. Apparently the story of Samson, when he kills 40 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. This is something that's kind of become a weird, like, why is the story of a jawbone of an ass in there?
I thought it was
But
an
apparently,
ox for some reason.
I believe it is an ass.
Okay, fair enough. Doesn't matter.
But
Go ahead.
either way, whatever it is, apparently in this time, when we're talking early Bronze Age, when it was difficult to come up with a sword anyway, the jawbone of an ass was a very common weapon for peasants. And it actually was not even kind of a weird thing that he would have used a jawbone back when this was written, but it's become a very strange concept to us now because we've all Hollywoodized our vision of the past that everybody looks like Brad Pitt with a sword and shield and is doing spinning jump cuts against their enemies rather than standing in line and screaming at each other for hours until somebody gets scared enough to run away. I also thought it was interesting. They think that this may have been the inspiration for like our first weapons were not straight swords but scythes, and that it would be kind of roughly the shape of a jawbone of an ass, which is not something they've have any concrete proof on, but I thought it was a very interesting aside that could potentially have been where we got scythe weapons from, was from the jawbone of an ass being a commonly used weapon in antiquity.
Oh, that's super interesting. I mean, it makes sense. Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, peasants, I mean, peasants are always poor, but our peasants are radically richer than, you know, peasants of the past, where, yeah, probably a dead donkey is a great if the jawbone of a dead donkey, smack
That's
a dude
nice.
upside the head, he
got
bleeds
two
and he
clubs
stops
right there.
moving. You know what I mean? It's like, it's actually it makes a lot of sense.
It's ready to
take this
use
and
too.
bash
You
his
might want
head.
to take a couple of incisors out of the front there so you got a nice grip, but you just kind of, once it's rotted off, just pull that sucker out of the bottom jaw and then break that wishbone in half, and you got you double-handed weaponry.
Yeah, it's actually not bad. It makes a lot of sense, actually.
What a way to go out too.
What, getting clubbed with a bone? Fuck
With
me.
a bone. You know, might even be, I mean, obviously bones get brittle over time as well, but might make a more reliable weapon than a bronze sword, which is going to be a very soft metal that's going to dull easily and eventually lose its shape.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I've never really thought about, I don't know, the efficacy of arms and how, I know that a lot of people argue about like samurais versus, you know, broadswords from the Knight era, and everyone's just like, well, Japanese swords, just the reason they have to fold it so many times is because they have like such impure steel, and it's just not nearly as good as what the Europeans did. And so, like, yeah, samurais versus knights doesn't end well because the samurai swords just like obliterate upon contact with, and so everybody ends up just getting ran through by the European knights.
I got to imagine too. I mean, Japanese samurais, wasn't that mostly leather armor that was kind of braided together? Maybe they had some plates underneath that I'm not familiar with. I don't know enough about Japanese samurai culture. But yeah, your European knights were like the original tanks. Like it was. Have you ever seen actual? I mean, for one, in Japan they've upkept a lot of their Japanese tradition or their samurai tradition, so we know pretty much exactly the techniques now, like still to this day. But there's a lot of it that was lost in the European knight tradition because we started using guns and conquering the world. So we, as if I was part of that. The Europeans.
You're white though.
I am white, but I didn't do any of that shit.
Heavy as your historical guilt.
I've conquered nothing in my lifetime, and my ancestors cry every day about it. But we've lost a lot of the like technique. We don't exactly know. We have a lot of old like drawings of how they held the swords and went at each other. And there's a whole study of people who try to break it down now and how they did it. I don't know if you've ever seen any videos of that, but it's interesting because it's so far away from what we picture in Hollywood, where there's these like just inches away from somebody's neck when they swing, and these ducks and these large swings over the top. It's like half the time they had their hand on the blade and they're almost trying to push their opponent down because both of them are wearing giant suits of iron. And the only way you get through that is to find a soft spot to stick that sword. So the best way to do it is to knock them on their ass and then stick that sucker through the breastplate and get them in the heart. There's not a lot of like head lopping going off in the actual medieval battles.
I could see that. Have you seen, on that same note, have you seen like recreations of medieval armor? It is very flexible because we think about these guys that like can't even get on their horses, you know, but I've seen like full like full blown recreations of it, and those
Way
guys
more
can, like they can sprint. You know what I mean? Like they can sprint at you. They were doing push-ups in it. They're very agile and mobile in it. So, and that's probably it though. You're looking for some sort of soft spot, like some sort of crease, right? Where if they fall down, maybe it exposes, you can get in the neck or.
There's some pretty great stuff I've seen about, like, there's at least one workout routine from one of these nights that got passed down, and it you see it and you go like, oh yeah, these guys were about it, man. They were like, I was trying to pull it up, but like, I mean, just doing things like they put their armor on in the morning and they would go train with a sword for an hour, and then they would go do somersaults for an entire football field to practice getting up quickly in their armor. And it's like these dudes drilled for, like, I mean, it's their full-time job. My job is to protect
Right.
the citizenry, so I'm gonna work out every day in 60 pounds of armor. Like, these were not these are they weren't your rich frat boys at the time. These were some intense individuals that were knights.
Which makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? Because there will always be a portion of the population, especially young men, that want to do the most daring, dangerous job. Once upon a time, they were knights. That evolves to cavalry. And then when that, then all of a sudden these people are now tank drivers and plane and pilots in the First World War. And then those people then become astronauts. You know what I mean? Like there's always a population that's willing to just like, we will be the best at what we do. And
I heard a good case for that one time, that like sociopathy used to be way more valuable in society. That
Mhm.
now we don't know what to do with our psychopaths. We lock them up in prison and they rape other men in there, and they're just insane.
Used
But
to
once
just
upon a
put 'em
time,
in-
you needed somebody at the front. You had a group of guys who were shaking in their boots. It might have been their first time on a battlefield, and you had one fucking psycho out there to make sure nobody got scared enough to run. Like, that's the guy right there, the intense, crazy dude.
Nope. It's like I don't know. There's actually a really fascinating book. It's called On Killing from Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, and he talks about that very thing where it's like out of like a subset of soldiers in the study of them, that not all of them, like the vast majority are not psychopaths, but in every professional army, like the British Army going into the American Army, moving into the 20th century, that there's always like there's probably like 5% of those psychopaths, and they do make damn good soldiers. We don't know what to do with them when the war is over because they're really only good at one thing. But when the war is going on, they are fantastic.
Oh, they're very important. Yeah, you definitely want those guys. I ran across a retelling of a story of one of these said psychopaths who found a different path in life that was useful. He was a football player. He broke other people's bodies and armor every day and made a good living of it. Do you know who Ricky Incognito is? So Ricky Incognito is an offensive lineman in the NFL for a very long time. He's about 6'3", 300 pounds, like just a monster of a man, and offensive lineman. So he uses his body to stop some of the most athletic 300-pound men in the world. And just a very overall scary individual who's also suffered from mental illness, as well documented in the past, which is just a handful of a mental illness problem to have. One of the biggest, scariest people you've ever seen. I think I'll save that part. That's a fun little. He is kind of most well known for being suspended in the NFL for bullying incoming rookies too hard. So he's a man who bullies NFL players to the extent that the NFL had to come down on him. Like, he's that kind of a scary individual. He went to college at the University of Nebraska. And there was a walk-on player who had gotten in a fight with a bunch of frat guys and got jumped and got beat up. And the next day at practice, all the coaches were like, "This is your brother. You are a family here. Like, if you don't have each other's back off the field, what kind of fucking football team are you going to be on the field?" And got them all riled up. So Ricky Incognito takes this guy after practice, drives to Greek Row, has him point out which house it is, knocks on the front door, and when they open it, boots the door in and proceeds to beat the fuck out of the entire fraternity. And I was listening to a Shane Gillis podcast when he was retelling this, and he made the great parable, I guess, just imagine being stoned in college with your buddies watching TV. Like, oh man, this is really funny stuff. And fucking a shaved gorilla kicks in your front door, and now you have to fight the scariest human being on the planet. It's just like, oh my god. And they even had some quotes from Bo Pelini, was the coach at the time. And after the fact, somebody said something to him years later, I think, in an interview. And he was like, yeah, we had some discussions afterwards about how maybe we don't need to charge up Ricky Incognito anymore. Like, let's not get him riled up anymore, because holy hell. I also like, at the end of the day, like when all this was coming out of him bullying other players, he had another, what was his name? Freeman was his last name. I can't remember his first name. He's a quarterback out of K-State, like basically he was their high draft pick quarterback. And he quit playing football because of mental health issues, and he cited the bullying of Ricky Incognito as why he couldn't play anymore. But I thought very interesting also, just another part of the simulation theory messing with this thing. The guy's name is Ricky Incognito. Ricky being Richard, which can be shortened to Dick. His name is Secret Asshole the whole time. Dick Incognito, the undercover Dick.
Man, that's
I had to shoot that in because it's been on my mind a lot lately, but I'm glad we talked about giant psychopaths so I could tell that story.
I can't imagine. I literally can't imagine. I was also, so when the Olympics were on, I was watching it, and watching like the dudes, I think it was the shot put specifically, and the hammer throw. And I was thinking, is like, could you imagine that dude in full armor standing across a battlefield from you, and just like, you,
dude, it's Helm's Deep, man. They're just hurling stones. There's boulders coming over from those fucking trolls on the other side.
It was like watching them throw those hammers. It's like, could you imagine if that thing is now like lobbed now? Now they're not trying to throw it as far as they can, but they're trying to like throw that thing as hard as they can, 40 yards away, and it's neck level. You know what I mean? Could you imagine catching one of those in the face or the neck? Yeah, I don't know. I guess if anything, I thank God that we live in a somewhat civilized society, that those people are spend their efforts throwing discus and shot puts, and not murdering peasants that get called up to arms to go defend their homelands.
Like a hammer throw, if you just replace the handle with another lead ball and have them spin around and release that, like that's a pretty devastating projectile. That's a lot of weight with a chain in the middle that could just take, I mean, yeah, if that sucker, even if it gets the two guys beside you with the balls, but it wraps that thing around your face, like you're probably not fighting the rest of the day.
Oh, it'd break your neck.
Chain.
You know what I mean? Like it would, I just think of all of the ways, the momentum and the inertia of all of just something like that hitting you in all the different ways. No, you're done for. Like it doesn't matter. It's
400-pound monsters, and
dude, it's
probably them with a cart full of boulders to like, here, shot put these at the enemy.
They probably snap your femur. You know what I mean? Like that's probably enough force. They could, if it didn't break your femur, you'd wish your femur was broken. You know what I mean? It's like
death sentence.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Like if it hit you in the gut, like I'm just thinking about like some peasant, right? Because armor is expensive, and so you're not going to war. Like a lot of these people don't have like good armor, and now all of a sudden that dude is now yeeting these hammers at you.
You've got on your great grandfather's prized steel-toed boots that have been passed down for generations with these beautiful shin guards, and that fucking ball comes right across the line and takes your femur out. God damn it, man. For to hit me in the toe, I'd be all right. I'll never walk again. And I'm probably going to get trampled by my own soldiers at this point.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I live when I do.
Are you aware of the origin of the middle finger gesture?
Yeah. I know at least the legend is that they would cut it off because English archers use it to draw. And so the French would cut it off to make archers render them useless. I've at least heard that.
The other way around, but yeah, that's at least the story is that one side or the other lopped off the fingers. I think it used to be two fingers too, because it started as the peace, like a reverse peace sign essentially.
Ah, gotcha.
Got eventually turned into the finger. I'm not really sure how that happened.
Okay, then that makes sense. Like I can still kill you, pretty much. That's how I've
I
always
still got
taken
this
it.
one. That's interesting. That if it was just the index finger, that then it became the next.
Yeah,
Who
yeah, I
knows?
don't know.
It's a
That's
great
the
story, nonetheless.
That's the
It's one I
story I've
quite like.
heard.
It's one I've told with unabashed confidence as truth several times in my life because I like it enough. I'm just I don't even tell people like, yeah, it is kind of bullshit, maybe, but
Yeah, well, it's what does Dan Carlin say? Even if ancient history isn't true, you have to believe it.
yeah.
You
Put
know
it
what I
together.
mean? To a certain degree, because there's so many of those stories. Like, how are we ever supposed to figure that stuff out? We'll never know, but it's a good story. And it's probably worth believing. You know what I mean? It's like there's no harm in believing
I
that that's where the middle finger comes from. It's English archers like taunting these French knights as they stand up on their hill. It's like, oh, we have longbows and it's muddy.
the,
You guys are all
the
gonna die
first
here
gang sign,
today.
North Side,
You
North
guys can't
Islands.
make it up the hill. Welcome to Agincourt, bitch. You know what I mean?
Isn't it, brother?
I need like 2 minutes if that's okay.
All right, fine. I guess I'll go P2.
All right, thank you.
Well, if we didn't find ourselves in this position again, where I've returned before Matthew, so you guys get a little solo carpenter action here. I got to thinking about like old sayings, like the etymology of these. That's even the right word. That's more specific word breakdown, I guess. But in the old sayings and their roots, one of my favorite is shit-faced drunk. Which comes from Victorian England, when there was a particular time of day that everybody would empty their chamber pots into the street. This is, you would just simply go to your window, chuck it out, because that's the kind of sewage systems we had at the time there in England, I suppose, was just get it to the ditch so that it can run down eventually. But if one was to get too intoxicated and forget what time of day it was, you might find yourself on the street just as a chamber pot is being expelled from one of the windows. And therefore might become shit-faced in your drunkenness. Another one I always liked was short end of the stick, which again, I guess I just know all the poo-poo ones, so I apologize for the narrow-minded view on these. But I believe that was from the Roman Colosseum in a time that predated toilet paper. And we had these public baths where there was usually a sponge, which hopefully would get cleaned off and used there at the Colosseum. But I'm sure at some point it gets dirty enough that it's difficult to clean. And somebody at the end of the stall who gets past the stick might end up with a well-used poop stick and therefore end up with the short end of the stick. Pretty gross stuff, but always fun to know. What other ones do we know? I think cats and dogs had a similar one where they, again, was Victorian England. And they had large amounts of stray dogs and cats, and even the cats and dogs that lived there would go between the shingled apartment tops, that were often connected from building to building. So it was an easy way for them to access their girlfriend dog down the way, or their buddy, or to chase off other cats in the neighborhood. But often these shingled roofs would become slick when it rained. And therefore, if it really started raining hard, sometimes dogs and cats would fall off the roof. And that would end the raining of cats and dogs. Always fun stuff. I feel like I was rattling through those, and now we don't have Matthew back. So I'm at a loss at this point of words. Where else do we go? Maybe we just give it a quick Google. Sayings. Root. Get your kicks from these Route 66 captions.
I heard that you were at a loss for words, which I find completely unbelievable.
To be fair, only on the specific topic of old sayings that I knew the root to that I was rattling off for.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
You're listening to our intermission.
Intermission. Yeah, that's fair.
Christ.
I was talking to somebody about this. Do you have any topics that you'd like to explore? Because I have one if you don't, but mine is.
Please go for it. I don't have anything pressing. What's on your mind?
Okay, so if you were to be executed, what method would you choose?
That's interesting. I'm probably. I mean, it depends a little bit on the context as well. Is this just like all context aside, simply how do you want to die? Or are we talking, am I mad at my executioners? Am I trying to make a political point?
No, it's like you're not just dying, right? It's not just like, oh, you're gonna die in a car crash today, or you know what I mean? It's nothing like that. It's like you have been, it's like, I don't know, you've committed some crime of some kind, and your punishment is now death. Yeah, possibly. And so now they're going to execute you for that. And they're kind enough to give you a form of execution, whatever you'd like. What are you taking?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Death by Snoo Snoo, brought to us by Futurama. But I'm going to guess that capital punishment is probably not going to reward me with, like, give me enough amphetamines and let me have sex until my heart explodes. Is probably not what they're going to allow in this instance.
That's not happening.
We're talking like realistic, traditional.
We're talking about like real capital punishments.
Right. That's interesting. I mean, lethal injection seems like a low pain one, but I've heard some contradictory statements in that maybe the poison, though it paralyzes you, may not kill off all your nerve endings right away, and you might get to feel a lot of discomfort along the way.
Yeah, I've heard my understanding of the cocktail is it's 3 separate drugs. The first one paralyzes you so you don't react to the second, which is the most painful. And then it's the combination of the second and the third that actually kills you. I've heard something.
Seems like if that's the case, why not start with the third or swap the second, third chemical, and then you get the pain part. Maybe that's part of the capital punishment. It's like now you get to feel the pain a little bit. Yeah, that's interesting. I would probably lean towards something to the brain, maybe close to the way we execute cattle in the feedlots. Like, give me that pulse gun rod, and just put it right in my middle of my frontal cortex.
Guillotine
makes me nervous because it doesn't kill the brain right away. And there was the famous case of the gentleman who went to prove that and blinked 21 times, I think, before he died.
Yeah,
which is,
I don't know if that's a true story or not, but still, there's still enough. Well, I think that I don't know if that one's bullshit. I don't know. I can't remember the specifics. Maybe it's 21 times, but disclaimer: I am an expert in literally none of the stuff that we've been talking about all night. My common understanding is that the theory of consciousness at this point is that you have some brain activity if your head gets lopped clean off for at least a couple of seconds, maybe as long as 10 until the oxygen supply in the brain depletes, but at least a couple is kind of the common understanding, at least as far as I know.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean, we don't know for sure that the rod to the head doesn't... It definitely shuts the body down. But do we know for sure that the brain is done feeling?
No, we don't.
Doesn't the brain not actually have...
The brain has no pain, though. Yeah, the brain does not have... there's no actual pain receptors on the brain.
Yeah, that's probably the way to go then. If you're looking for the cleanest death possible, is like put something through my brain at an extraordinary speed. Even if it's not the Cal Rod gun, like bring that 9mm over here and
revolver to the back of the head, unceremoniously shot in the basement of the Lubyanka.
I've always had this weird thing in my head, and this might be like a little bit of hero complex and hubris and narcissism on my part. But I always thought if somebody's going to shoot me, I want that motherfucker to look me in the eyes when he does it.
So
Like,
you want to go out?
You get to take the image of my head getting blown off with you, kind of thing. Like if you're going to pull the trigger, at least have the balls to look me in the eyes when you do it.
Yeah. So you want to go out Marshall Ney status, right? So
Yeah.
after Napoleon,
I'm not familiar with that, but yes.
Okay, so the story with that is, right, so Napoleon comes back, loses again at Waterloo. He's exiled. Certain people are now tried for crimes, and Marshall Ney is one of them who receives death by a firing squad. And so he requests that he gets to give the command to the soldiers. And so the story goes that he's not blindfolded. He's dressed in his full, martial attire, and he raises his sword and he says, "Soldiers, this is the last order I shall give you. When I drop my sword, aim straight and true at my heart."
I would have said that, but fair enough.
Yeah,
that's the heart seems like
I've
seen some deer get shot in the heart and make it 100 yards before they fall. Like it's not a surefire way to go out quick.
That's also fair.
Granted,
I guess
have the benefit of he probably hadn't heard the guillotine legend as I have, and he's probably not aware of all
I'm
this.
sure he has. This is a guy that lived through the
That's a
terror,
good point. That's directly after it, isn't it? Yeah.
He's the guy that they cut his cloth through surviving the terror. So you go at Marshall Ney status.
Yeah, I think I like that. I think you pull the trigger and you look me right in the eye when you do it. And I want to try to haunt you or possess your body in this moment where my spirit leaves mine.
That's fair.
Try to use the astral realm to make the rest of your life a short and miserable one.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. I don't really whatever it is, I just hope it's quick. I don't want hanging, because on the off chance that they get something wrong and I have to suffocate, essentially just dangle there and thrash.
Yeah, you want the neck to break.
The chance of hanging is too high. So I would either go for guillotine or firing squad. If you could get if this is a humane execution, give me the chamber filled with nitrogen. You know what I mean? Because I just start breathing in, and eventually I just get sleepy and pass out. Because the sensation of suffocation is not a lack of oxygen, but it's a buildup of CO2. So in the nitrogen chamber, and that's that kind of, you know what I mean? There's those suicide pods in Switzerland. That's what it is. It just fills the chamber full of nitrogen. And so you keep breathing and you breathe out because you still get to expel CO2, but your oxygen levels just get lower and lower with every breath until you just pass out and you die. Here, it's the most painless way to die if you're conscious.
That would be a pretty decent. I inhaled a helium balloon at one of my birthday parties as a child and then passed out while singing Happy Birthday. And I was told by the doctor afterwards that your body is not able to perceive the difference in helium. And I think nitrogen's the same thing. It's it kind of thinks it's oxygen, and your body doesn't really know what to do with it. So it just kind of keeps doing what it normally does.
Yeah, because every breath that we take is 78% nitrogen. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, we're breathing in a lot of stuff. It's
4 out of 5 parts of every breath that we take is nitrogen, and so all you do is you replace what little part of oxygen we actually need to live with nitrogen.
Right. And there you go. Now you're taking a very long nap, sir.
Yeah,
very peaceful dream.
Yeah, I guess what spurred this conversation with another person was we were talking about that Apple TV movie Napoleon, which was okay at best. Kind of boring, very historically inaccurate in a lot of important ways, but whatever. No one cares.
They're really good at that. That was the Netflix also did an Alexander the Great one, and Alexander the Great probably did some butt fucking. He was of the time and of the people that did it. I'm sure it happened. But they have they open it up with the second fact they give you. They're he was from Macedonia and he was exiled as a child. And also he was definitively gay and this was his lover. And you're you don't have that proof. You can't do that with history. You're just shoehorning in what you want to believe. And sure, I mean, I have no problem with he probably was gay. He probably was bi or whatever, and probably had sexual
He
experiences.
probably
with men.
fucked whoever he wanted to.
Yeah, but the
Men
thing
or
is, you
what-
don't
you know what I mean?
have proof, so you can't present it as proof.
Yeah, that's fair. No, I think that's you make a good point. But I guess we were talking about the opening scene of that movie where he's in the crowd, which is bullshit because like right off the bat, like he was not in the crowd when Marie Antoinette was executed, which are like instantly started to bug me. It's like he wasn't fucking there. You can't put him in the crowd in this pivotal moment when he wasn't there. But okay, anyways. But I was thinking about like what it would be like to actually be executed via the guillotine, right? Like you're in the cell, they lead you out, everybody's mad at you, they're throwing shit at you, you're led up to, and they shove your head in this thing and they lock your neck down, and you're staring at this basket, knowing in the next like 10 seconds, that's it. You know what I mean? It's like this is where my life ends as people cheer and scream for your death as you stare at a fucking basket. I was wondering about like the like I don't know. I wonder how they. I guess it doesn't matter how you deal with it. You're going to die, but
Yeah,
I wonder how I would deal with that.
you
Would I
have
have
a
like,
salient
would I be
mind
calm?
sitting
Would
here
I-
in my office chair. It's easy to say, like, I might ask some questions about how sharp are we making the blade? Are we upkeeping it? Might make sure my chin's out real good so we don't have any of those like awkward
Yeah.
executioners stomping on the blade to get it to go down kind of moments. Like let's
Of
make sure we get a
course.
clean run here. But yeah, it's a totally different thing when you're faced with the terror of death, and two, the anguish of the crowd, like people chucking rotting fruits and vegetables at you, and to be
Wanting you dead.
faced with the overwhelming desire of your own death is probably an interesting feeling that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, and there's so many of those stories where you get these little quips, and whether they happened or not, it's debate. But I mean, it had to have at least been a rumor to make it this far. But there's a friend, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a French grammarian who was executed via guillotine. And as they showed him his execution warrant, and he goes, "You've made a spelling error." And those were his last words. And he corrects the execution. It's like this is how it should actually be, and it's like those are his last words, and they locked his head up.
Like, cool, pull the switch. Send that
So
blade
I
down.
would like
Shut up.
I would like to think that I have enough fortitude. You know what I mean? Like I'd like to think that I would have enough acceptance, and that my sense of humor
Okay.
wouldn't poop
Get
out.
you a
Then
couple Ryan Reynolds, quick quips in right at the end.
I would hope, because at this, like, I
Get
mean,
some
you
yo
know me,
mamas in right there.
nothing is sacred to me to a large degree, and it's like I will make jokes about things that aren't funny in inappropriate times because it's how I cope. It's how I deal with, fucked up things. I make jokes, and anybody that knows me well knows that it's just like, I would like to think that I hope that my sense of humor would also continue in that moment. It's like, well, I am actually about to die, so might as well make your last words good.
A great popular motif of like the defiant hero and the moment of reckoning when he's finally going to be taken out, and the even if it's not comical, the like screaming of freedom by Mel Gibson just after they took his manhood away, like, to never give up. But it's tough to also overcome that moment and to have your great quippy moment without blubbering and crying and screaming for mercy.
Completely botch it.
Maybe a more innate human reaction to that kind of situation.
Could you imagine the regret, right? So it's like it always comes. So you have a conversation, argument with someone in hours down the road, usually in the shower. You think about, damn, I should have said that. Could you imagine like the regret that you would have as like you missed your opportunity for the final last words? They shoved
I got
your
one,
head, and it's like, oh no, let me try again.
I have a good one. Well, you won't have to suffer that indignity for very long. Would be the bright side.
Right.
You're only gonna have to think about it for 10 more seconds, and then maybe 20 more seconds after that when your head's lopped off.
Yeah,
depending on
maybe.
if you believe that line of.
I wonder. Let's see.
I did give it a Google. It does refer to it as a legend. So, to be fair, we don't have any concrete proof that happened.
Consciousness last after head separation.
Like a cockroach.
Um,
I do know I've seen, and there's video of this. There's a horrific scientific experiment that was going on at one point in time where they were trying to transplant a dog's head onto another dog. And they did manage to keep a dog's head alive with a sort of the same thing. It's like a pacemaker. It was like a blood circulating machine that was circulating blood into the brain, and the dog was like panting. Just the head of the dog was panting and looking around the room for, I don't know how long they kept it alive, but it's like, what is the purpose of this experiment line, and what are we trying to accomplish here?
Jesus.
This is a pretty horrific experiment we're pulling with Fido over there. Old Yeller's not having a good time.
That's rough. That's wild. So there's a lot of different stuff. I mean, honestly, who fucking knows? But it seems to be that the consensus is that up to a couple of seconds, maybe 30 on the high end is what I've seen. Just in like a
30 is
quick little
wild.
search. 30 is a long time. But I mean, it's like I could
There's
see a
also a
couple.
thing though, like I don't know, maybe you get some kind of distress signal sent to your brain when you don't have feeling in your limbs, but I don't really think it's how it works when people go paralyzed. They just can't feel it.
You just can't.
So
Yeah.
you might just have like a really sharp pain in your neck for 30 seconds, which is,
I mean, 30 seconds seems long to me. My guess is a
while.
couple. It wouldn't shock. I don't think that it's instant. I think that there's enough blood.
I mean, yeah, it would make sense
think
that
there's-
while there's still oxygen within your brain,
I think there's still enough
still
blood and
functioning.
oxygen that you've got a couple of seconds of awareness after your head gets lopped off. Like the last thing that you see is like your face falling into the basket. And that's and that's kind of it,
I was actually cringing at something different here. I Googled the dog experiment. It was 1950s Soviet surgeon Vladimir Dimitrov performed experiments to transplant a dog's head. They did, in fact, put a dog's head on another dog's body. They didn't remove the original head. They just put it onto its circulatory system, and it lived 29 days. 29 days of that.
So let me make this. So they took a dog's head and they put it on another dog that still has its head. And they hooked second dog's head up to the circulatory system of the dog that still has a head. And the head lived for 29 days.
Oh, even worse. He grafted the head and front legs of one dog onto the body of another.
So now the dog has 4 legs and 2 heads? Do I understand this correctly?
Most dogs have 4 legs, so I think it was 6.
Sorry. 4 front legs.
Yeah, it said the results were that they were able to keep one of the dogs, which means God knows how many times he tried this, alive for 29 days. He was able to keep a 2-hearted dog alive for 2.5 months. I don't know what that means exactly. Maybe that's the front half there, where they kept 2 hearts pumping. And they said the puppy's head kept its own personality and even remained playful as any other puppy. I don't know about that. Oh, there is a criticism component.
Thank God. Thank God.
Interestingly enough, criticized about his ethics.
Shocking.
Illness and time. Transplant head. Yeah, I think kind of the idea was probably prolonging Soviet leadership's lives. So it's if old Vladimir, the president, dies, we could probably just put his body on a head on a young body and keep him pumping.
When is this experiment?
1950. Well, in the 1950s.
So Stalin dies in 52 or 53.
Yeah, maybe that's why it was so pressing.
When does Stalin die? I want to say it's 53. It is March 5th, 53.
Oh, so this is why I remembered the facts wrong, because much like a lot of the horrors after World War II, we learned it from you, Dad. It was the Americans' experiment in 1908 was the first time a dog's head was successfully transplanted onto another dog's body and was kept alive for a period of time.
Yeah.
So that's the one I've seen video of or heard of was
The American one.
Dog's head on the other one. That might have been too early for video though. 1908. Did we have video in 1908?
It would have been we would have. It would have been very grainy, and it moves at that unnatural speed. You know what I mean? It moves at that like half speed. That's
I think I saw that video.
us.
That's the memory I have is a very like weird blinking video where you like see the runs in the film as it goes by. And like, oh, there's a black spot. It's I mean, just good fucking Lord. That's a
Okay, so
hell of a line of work.
this raises a very interesting question. It might need to be a whole episode. So if it's more than you want to dive into now, let me know. But should there be ethical considerations when it comes to science, right? If the point is to just learn and to know, should we put ethical guidelines on it? And I don't know the answer because I've wrestled with this one a lot because it stemmed from a conversation of most of the stuff that we learned about the human body came from the horrific experiments that the Nazis and the Japanese did, specifically Unit 731. We gave all of them amnesty, right? It's like hand over all of your papers, give us all of that information, and we will sweep your crimes against humanity under the rugs in the sake of, you know what I mean? So that knowledge is not lost.
And nobody talks about the bright side of the Holocaust. I mean, come on, guys. Let's look at the silver lining here.
And so
the government wouldn't know how to poison you with fluoride so that you become more compliant if they didn't take all these Nazi papers.
There's a lot of that stuff. There's also a lot of things that's like, we actually know how to, it's like we know how to save and treat a lot of stuff too, just through the kind of like the base anatomy that we learned through these experiments, like learning how systems actually work and then being able to take that information and save lives with it. So, but it also is fucking horrific. And so the question that I've been chewing on is like, should we have ethical considerations when it comes to science? Like, if the point of science is to know things for the betterment of humanity, are we now in this greater, the greater good argument? And I don't have an answer for it, but
handcuffed yourself and lost progress because you were too worried
because
about
of ethical considerations
on a rabbit before you rolled it out to the general population. That's a good question. I mean, I see where you're coming from for sure, because you have to push the envelope a little bit sometimes to get answers. And there's going to be answers you probably can't get to, at least without another advance in technology within that field, without cracking the egg, getting in the middle of it.
That's it.
My knee jerk is definitely yes, because there's some absolute horrors that have happened. And I don't know that, I mean, I guess you can make the argument that like, hey, look at the amount of human life that has been saved and improved from simply the loss of X amount of people that had to be experimented on, or, X amount of animals that we had to kill along the way. I think maybe the more poignant question is like, do we hold the same level of ethics when it comes to our massive and readily available subject test experiment population and the homeless? Should we just start incorporating homeless people into medical testing now to save the animals? We help Pete out a little bit, meet him halfway. Mostly what we might find out is, oh yeah, this one also kills you if you have cocaine and amphetamines in your system. We're finding a lot of these cocktails just straight up murder you if you also have your own cocktail inside you at the time you're admitted.
Yeah. I mean, I guess on that same vein though, right? If the goal is just the furthering of knowledge, then why not snag homeless people off the street and experiment them? And it's a very horrific you know what I mean?
On another level, we used to have other populations we didn't consider full people, and we go look at Tuskegee. You can find another example of the government deeming one particular group not to be as important as the rest. And to
Yeah, no,
wrestling.
it's bad.
So
It's
there's
bad.
that too of like,
I'm not
once you
saying that.
open Pandora's box of like everything is above board if we're going for knowledge and improvement of technologies, then at what point does the government start going like, this group's been a problem, let's go ahead and start everybody
Yeah.
who voted for Donald Trump more than one time gets to go to the experiment camps.
Yeah, no, it is a question that I think the answer becomes quite obvious pretty quickly. Actually, I was actually talking to somebody who's a lawyer a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about just as like, if you think about the law long enough, you can come to the correct answer, right? Regardless if you're an attorney or not. It's like it's like any like, or at least good laws, you can come to the correct answer soon enough. Like anybody can work their way through that. And I think that this probably falls into that same category where we can work our way to the correct answer pretty quickly.
The correct answer is ethics should probably be involved in everything we do as human beings. And
Yeah,
don't just
probably.
keep out of getting horrifying. I mean,
and
that's a
there's,
pretty common motif in science fiction. It's been around that's been a question that we've been trying to answer for a long time, I guess.
Absolutely. And I won't just sit here and regurgitate someone else's material, but in one of the seasons of Revisionist History with Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about the ethics of some like science experiments. And in particular, it was the Minnesota starvation experiment, where a bunch of conscientious objectors did not want to go fight and kill people, but they did want to serve their country. So they signed up for this. They signed up to be starved. And the whole purpose of it was like, we're going to starve you because we know that when this war ends, we're going to have to feed a bunch of people that have been starving. So we need to know the best way to reintroduce calories to starving people. And so these people signed up for it. And the season kind of hinged around like the ethics of that experiment. Like, would you be able to get away with that experiment today? What is informed consent? Like all of these kind of very interesting questions where
That's a good point, because I'm sure a nice population of that group at some point decided they didn't want to be part of the experiment anymore and they would like some food. And was it in the contract they signed that they're not allowed to have food even if they are completely fed up with the experiment and they get to stay at camp?
Spoiler, almost everybody stuck it out, and one person was forced to eat and drop out of the experiment because he suffered like a life-threatening injury. And even in the hospital under some very dire conditions, he wanted to continue the experiment. And the lead researcher had to come down. And he's like, "No, like you're out and you have to eat." It's like, "No, you got to eat your food, bro."
I'm shocked. That's a lot of conviction from those people. Kudos to them. Really, really believed in what they stood in, even if it was silly.
Yeah, it's super interesting though. But yeah, I won't regurgitate all of that information to people, but it is a really fascinating series of podcasts because he raises the questions like, okay, well, like what is informed consent? Like how much can you be informed when it comes to groundbreaking medical experiments? It's like what are you actually signing up for? And can you ever know? Like, and can anyone ever give informed consent for anything?
Huh. That's interesting.
Pretty interesting.
That is really interesting. I might have you send me that. I might like to read that or listen to that, whatever that context was.
That's very super interesting.
So we're almost at 2 hours here. It's probably about time to wrap up. I have one more thing I want to get off my chest.
Hit me with it.
In the spirit of kind of what we're trying to reform this podcast in, that this is a podcast about us informing you about what the general population is wrong about. We're against the mob. We're against the groupthink, the sheeple out there, the NPCs who are incapable of forming their own opinions and therefore have become a danger to all of us. I think that we need a huge campaign in order to address a problem that I'm having a lot of times at work, in that it should not be on the onus of society, but rather the readjustment of 100-pound, 60-year-old women to realize that their level of expectation for the temperature of a workplace is ridiculous. I had a woman come in today wearing a sheen blouse that was nice and light and shorts. And she walked in and looked me in the eyes as sweat beaded down my brow into my eye from working all day. And she said, "It is cold in here." And I wanted to shake this old woman until her tiny head fell off. I'm so sick of tiny, tiny anorexic women wearing nothing telling me that it's cold while I have swamp ass at work. I don't want to hear it ever again.
I had no idea where that was going. I'm so pleased with the conclusion.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, I have tied my life to a Latina woman who comes from a very hot climate ancestrally. And I am probably the whitest person you've ever laid eyes on if you're watching this on YouTube. I'm shockingly Caucasian and from an area that I'm sure, in order to force this pigment of skin upon my ancestors, had to be cold as a mofo. And it's just, as a fact of that, we have jackets and blankets everywhere and every nook and cranny, and she's required to bring one everywhere because anything above 75 degrees, I turn into a puddle of Irishman. And it's just not acceptable. It's so much easier to put a blanket on. And I think that's just the message that I want to leave our listeners with, especially all the 6-year-old women that listen to our podcast. I know it's a huge block.
Huge block.
Active anarchist 60-year-old women. But if you're a tiny lady, take a fucking jacket with you instead of scolding the fat guy that works at the restaurant you're going to. And spare me the bitch out.
That's fair. No, I agree. It's as somebody that, I mean, I have no defenses. I have no natural defenses for the climate that I live in. You know what I mean? My people are tropical, stolen from the west coast of Africa and then sent to the southern part of the United States until somehow I end up in the mountains of New Mexico.
It was
a
all
weird.
inclusive, to be fair.
It was very, it's like lodging and room and board were to be desired, and there's some morale problems along the way, but we made it. So
The Yelp reviews are not the best for this establishment, but
yeah, but I get where you're coming from, because as somebody that has no natural defenses to the cold and dark that I experience half a year, it's like I get that. And it's also very easy. It's much easier to put clothes on, blankets, jackets. They make some very good people that bitch about the cold. It's like, go buy yourself a good $40 pair of socks.
right,
And
there's only so naked I'm allowed to be in public.
and now I'm just naked and hot.
Right. That
because
also.
being naked doesn't alleviate the fact that it's still hot outside. But I can put on. It's like I have a kit. You know what I mean? Like it could be negative 30 degrees outside, and I can walk outside and be comfortable. I have all of the right clothing to where negative 30 degrees does not matter. I'm bundled up literally head to toe, but I can be comfortable.
You have no idea the rage that builds up inside of me when it's 75 degrees in the building and somebody tells me it's too cold. I almost lose my mind every day.
That's fair. I think maybe let's end. Okay, so you've told me what really annoys you. What annoys me right now are bureaucrats. I had so little respect for
Oh
bureaucrats.
yeah, you disrespected the sanctity of your meeting this evening, didn't you?
I did. I just left. I didn't even tell anybody that I left. And I'm the chairman of that committee. I just left.
Just walked out.
I
This is
just-
a
yeah, I-
meeting or a Zoom meeting?
No, it was physical. We were walking a proposed trail. Like we were physically all there walking a
You
trail,
just
and
took off.
somebody was like, "Hey,
Saw
I
the
got to."
chance of the Irish pie.
Yeah, and I left. Like somebody was running someone else back to the vehicles for an emergency, and I just got in.
Let me help. Get to
Well,
my living room. I have to listen to
But
this
also,
shit
it's like it's nothing that like I gotta go to that fucking meeting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So it's nothing that you know what I mean. It's like they can fill me in on the rest of it, but I have no respect for bureaucrats.
There is certainly a lot of that in these bureaucratic positions. They attract people who obviously enjoy the bureaucracy, and those people also enjoy lengthy explanations about nothing. They love to just have meetings and do talks, and nothing ever gets done. But man, it feels good to have this little meeting on Friday night.
I can't stand them. I can't stand bureaucrats. I have no respect for them, and I'm probably like too bad interactions with bureaucrats away from like going completely radical, and well, you guys will see me on the news at that point. So
Bulldozer too.
so that's so Logan's got temperature, old ladies in temperature. I've got bureaucrats. That's what's bugging us.
That's what you're all wrong about.
All right, well, let's end on a good note, because I do like ending on a positive note. Logan, what are you stoked about?
I mean, this is going to sound silly and insignificant probably, but man, I just love football season. This is like the closest thing I hold to my heart as a religion still. Like this is the most emotion and religious practice I put in to anything is football season. I'm just pumped, man. I love football. Give me all your bullshit about breads and circuses and how I'm taking my eye off the ball. I don't care. I love our modern day gladiator sport so much. Every offseason, I try to talk myself into how much I like basketball. I love playing basketball. Basketball practice is more entertaining than football practice was, because football practice is a lot of like drills and hard stuff, and basketball practice is mostly playing basketball. It's a beautiful game. It's great. It's a flow. It's something I can still do as an older man now that I definitely couldn't go play football with any kind of level of responsibility without blowing out an ACL or an AC joint. And every year I tell myself how much, I think I like basketball as much as football. And then a month before football kicks off, I'm like, nope, not even close, man. I love football so much, and I'm so excited for it to be here.
I agree. I'm really pumped. I know. I can already hear like the eye roll of some people. Bread and circus, yeah, spare me. It's like we all have to have distractions. We are humans with thumbs, and I have to cope in some way with all the fucked up shit that's going on. So like, let me have my coping mechanisms. Like,
I can't just jack off all day. I got to do something else eventually.
It's like you can't live. And also like spare. This is one of my favorite things to tell people now. Is like, spare me. When someone starts talking about this, just spare me your bread and circus speech. I've heard it. I know it better than you do. So like, leave me alone.
Meanwhile, they're following how many celebrities on Instagram and
just leave me be. I don't want to hear it. Spare me. It's just
spare.
Simple as that. I just don't care. Yeah, that's what's up.
All right, hit the button. Send it to the people.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys, for listening. I think something that what was the tagline that we had, Crescent? We're not saying that we're right about everything, but we're definitely saying that you're wrong. What something like that? It was something like, we're not saying that we're right, but you're definitely wrong. Something, I don't know.
Wrong.
Yeah,
we'll work on that. That's maybe by the third episode of StreamYard, we'll have some kind of tagline and coherent intro and outro.
We'll work on it. But I gotta do the right thing. And,
the music is out.
Get some music going.
Maybe there it is. Oh, professionalism, polished.
We really appreciate you guys tuning in week and week out. Thank you for embracing and enduring our year-long hiatus, but we're back in whatever form that we can, and it's really my fault, but I won't fall on the sword much longer, maybe a couple more times, but until then, we fight against the mob with people over politics. We'll see you next week.